everyone, and welcome. Thank you for being here today. My name is Anya Fetcher. I'm the Federal Policy Advocate at the Natural Resources Council of Maine. And we are here today on Earth Day. I'm actually looking at, might be a bald eagle. We're here today to talk about the importance of environmental protections and our health. 1 year ago, EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin announced plans for the biggest deregulation in history. In addition, he proposed a 65% cut to the EPA budget, the Environmental Protection Agency budget, and staff. Since that time, the EPA has reversed, weakened, repealed, and eliminated hundreds of environmental and public health protections. This includes, but is not limited to, standards to remove carbon pollution from power plants, redefining the waters of the United States to eliminate protections for hundreds of thousands of miles of wetlands and streams, repealing the endangerment finding, which is the legal basis for regulating carbon emissions under the Clean Air Act, claiming that they do not cause harm to human health and well-being, rolling back the regional haze rule, delaying methane pollution requirements and compliance deadlines for PFAS in drinking water, and repealing the mercury and air toxic standards and the Good Neighbor Plan, both of which are very important here in Maine as we get so much pollution from coal-fired and oil-fired power plants in other states. We are the tailpipe of the nation, so the pollution that is emitted elsewhere in the country ultimately ends up here in Maine, where we have to breathe it in, and it worsens asthma and lung disease and other issues. I'm here today mostly to introduce and share these other people who are going to be talking to you more specifically about some of the rollbacks we've seen, and most importantly, the impacts on the health of Mainers that they will be causing. First, I'm happy to introduce Dr. Beverly Johnson, a biochemist and professor of Earth and Climate Sciences at Bates College.
Thank you, Anya. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you this morning. So today is Earth Day, but as we look around Maine, the news isn't about celebration. It's about a wake-up call. In February, the federal government officially walked away from the endangerment finding. As Anya said, this is the legal rule that requires the EPA to protect us from carbon pollution. They claimed the danger isn't clear. The facts on the ground tell a different story, though. According to the Maine Climate Council's latest scientific assessment, the danger isn't just clear, it's undeniable. The last 6 years, 2020 through 2025, now stand as some of the 10 warmest years ever reported in our state. We've been past the era of predicting change, and we're now living through it. As record-breaking extremes reshape our coastlines, our economy, and our very health. The transformation is driven by a clear physical link. Greenhouse gases are trapping excess heat in our atmosphere, fueling a cycle of extremes. Maine is becoming wetter and wetter, and the intensity of the rainfall has changed. For example, instead of steady soaking rains, we now experience rain bombs, days where more than 2 inches of water fall in a matter of hours. These bursts overwhelm our fields, wash out our roads, and prove that climate change is no longer a future threat, it's an immediate one. That heat isn't just staying in our air, it's being absorbed by our oceans. And as that water warms, it physically expands. For our coastal communities, this means climate change carries an immediate and rising threat. Sea levels are already 7.5 inches higher than they were 100 years ago. And the rate of rise has doubled in just the last 30 years. This results in more frequent and easily flooded coastlines. We felt the full weight of this phenomenon in January 2024, when record-breaking storms hit an already elevated ocean. They caused over $90 million in damage to our public infrastructure and a loss of approximately 28% of our protected coastal dunes. Scientists warn that 2024 is not an outlier. It was a preview. The Maine Climate Council has set a clear baseline for our future. We must manage for 1.5 feet of sea level rise by 2050 and 4 feet by the end of the century. We're now facing a reality where nuisance flooding in places like Portland could happen 10 to 15 times more often than it does today. This doesn't mean we're just losing our beaches. We're losing the buffer that protects our roads, our homes, and our community livelihoods. The crisis doesn't stop at the shoreline. It extends into our waters. The Gulf of Maine is now warming faster than 97% of the world's oceans. We're seeing more frequent ocean heat waves that are shifting the entire ecosystem and destabilizing the species that generations of Maine families have built their lives around. At the same time, our waters are absorbing a massive proportion of the carbon dioxide we emit, leading to ocean acidification. Changing chemistry makes it harder for shellfish and lobster, our iconic species, to build their shells. When you combine record heat with rising acidity, you aren't just changing the weather, you are jeopardizing the future of Maine's heritage. A little bit more zoom here, and then I'll get to good stuff. This isn't just an environmental issue. Climate change acts as a threat magnifier for our physical and mental health. In December 2023, we lost 4 Mainers to floodwaters and falling trees during a single record-breaking storm. As our summers intensify, the danger shifts to the people who build and feed our state. The Maine, an outdoor worker, is now 8 times more likely to suffer a heat-related medical emergency than the average resident. This effectively places a target on the backs of construction crews, farmers, and fishermen. And beyond the physical, the trauma of extreme storms and flooding is directly linked to increases in anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Women, children, and Indigenous people are at a higher risk. But if the data and our experiences are a wake-up call, our response to this is a source of hope. Maine isn't just documenting the damage. We are proving that a different future is possible. We have already become a national leader in the clean energy transition, installing over 200,000 heat pumps, surpassing our state goals years ahead of schedule, and helping thousands of families lower energy costs. Maine's clean energy economy is the fastest growing in New England, with 16,000 Mainers now working in the clean energy sector. This is the Maine way. We don't just endure the storm, we build the solution. So in conclusion, the science is clear. The intensity of these impacts is directly tied to the concentration of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere. And to stabilize our climate and protect the Maine we know, we must continue to reduce our reliance on the fossil fuels that create the greenhouse gases and drive volatility. We cannot afford to wait for the next record to be broken before we acknowledge the source of the problem. The endangerment finding was designed to protect public health and welfare, the very things now under assault in Maine. The Maine Won't Wait Climate Action Plan is a rigorous response to this crisis, but it cannot exist in a federal vacuum. By removing the endangerment finding, the EPA is ignoring the physical reality of the impacts on greenhouse gases on climate. While federal policy may have changed, the physical evidence in our state has not. We will continue to experience these impacts and to document them so that we can ensure our future decisions are based on the reality of Maine's environment rather than a shift in Washington's priorities. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And now I'd like to introduce Patricia Hart, who is the mayor of Gardiner, where we are today.
Thank you, Anya, and good morning, everyone. It's an honor for me to welcome you to our beautiful waterfront park this morning here on Earth Day 2026. We are here on the banks of the mighty Kennebec River with the confluence of the Coppice Stream, a place that's rich in history and in beauty here for the people of Gardiner. The river and the stream are not just scenery, they are our history. The Kennebec River fed its earliest peoples. It carried people, timber, and trade to far out points. The stream powered mills, and both the river and the stream helped build a working waterfront and a downtown with deep roots. They've given us beauty, recreation, commerce, and an important sense of place. But they've also reminded us more than once that water can shape a community in both good ways and hard ways. For a long time, the Kennebec River and the stream carried the weight of pollution and neglect. And then people here, our community members, did something powerful. They refused to accept that as normal. Community members, advocates, scientists, and public servants pushed for cleaner water and stronger federal protections. That work, year after year, helped the river and the stream recover from its polluted past. Now the fish have returned and are thriving. And in fact, in a few short weeks, we'll see the alewife swimming up the stream to spawn, and we'll see the sturgeon dumping out of the river right here. Today, when we talk about Earth Day, we're talking about that kind of steady commitment, choosing restoration over resignation. But Earth Day also serves as a reality check. In recent years, we've been living through more frequent heavy rain events. Storms that arrive fast and dump a lot of water and leave us bracing for the next storm. In 2023, that risk turned into terrible flooding events that changed our daily life in Gardiner. That year, Gardiner suffered 2 catastrophic floods, one in May when the banks of the Coppice Stream overflowed into the businesses on Water Street, and a second in December when both this mighty river and the stream rose to historic levels, impacting businesses on the entire north side of Water Street. It knocked out power for days. The high winds, flooding, and protracted power outages impacted much of the city and threatened the operation of the Main Avenue sewer pump station on the backs of the river. In fact, we were all very worried that it was going to release its contents into the river and cause great devastation. Fortunately, that did not happen. We saw the impacts in our downtown. We saw it in our basements. We saw it in a place that many of us rely on without even giving it a second thought. Art Hannaford grocery store and the pharmacy that serves us inside of it. When that store flooded and had to close, it wasn't simply an inconvenience. It was 100 days, more than 3 months, without a local grocery store and without the pharmacy services that so many residents depend on. For families, seniors, and anyone managing a chronic health condition, that kind of disruption is exhausting and frightening. For the small businesses that were impacted, flooding was not just one day of cleanup. It's a long tail of consequences. Ruined inventory, damaged equipment, canceled appointments, and lost income that can never be made back. Some businesses were hit more than once that year, and each time the recovery gets harder. When you're forced to replace major systems like water heaters and furnaces again and again, when your insurance changes, when your staff are stretched thin, it takes a real toll on whether you can stay open at all. In fact, we did lose a couple businesses in 2023 as a result of the flooding. And it's really important that we talk about the mental health impact too, because disaster doesn't end when the water recedes. It lives on in the worry every time rain is in the forecast. It shows up as sleepless nights, short tempers, and that constant question in the back of your mind. When is it going to happen again? When people feel unsafe in their homes or uncertain about their businesses and jobs, or cut off from basic services like pharmacies and grocery stores, it strains families and it strains the whole community. So what do we do with all of that today on Earth Day? We keep doing local work, improving stormwater systems, planning wisely, supporting neighbors and businesses after extreme weather events. But we also have to be honest with ourselves. Gardiner and other municipalities can't solve these problems alone. We need federal policies that protect the environment and prepare communities for the reality we're living in. Policies that defend clean water and air, safeguard wetlands and floodplains, that help to absorb storm surge. We need to reduce pollution that fuels more extreme weather and invest in infrastructure that can handle what's coming. When those protections are weakened, communities like ours, like this community right here, pay the price first. Today, we can hold two truths at once: gratitude for how far the Kennebec has come and determination to protect what we've rebuilt. Let's honor the people who fought for a clean river, and let's stand up for the policies and investments that will keep our families safe and our businesses thriving. If there's one thing Gardiner has proven, it's that we show up for our community before, during, and after the storm. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for caring about this lovely place we call home. Happy Earth Day, everyone.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Dr. Tony Owens. He's an emergency medical physician at Maine Medical Center.
Thank you, Anya, and thank you for the other folks that are standing out here in the cold on the Earth Day. My name is Tony Owens. I've practiced emergency medicine here in Maine for over 40 years. In the 4 decades I've seen our community through pandemics, severe winters, and increasingly the devastating health effects of changing climate. I'm not here as a politician. I'm here because the Trump administration's recent decisions to dismantle EPA regulations, specifically repealing the endangerment finding that links greenhouse gases to public health threats, is not just an environmental policy shift, it's a direct assault to the health of my patients. When the EPA stops regulating tailpipe emissions, coal power plants, and methane leaks, the air we breathe becomes filthier, the planet gets hotter. In the emergency department, that doesn't mean regulations are lifted, it means more patients needing to breathe. Let's talk about these rollbacks mean here in Maine. Where air quality standards are weakened, pollutants like fine particulate matter increased. These particles are tiny enough to enter our bloodstream, causing worsening heart attack rates, strokes, and respiratory diseases. I'm preparing for an uptick in patients with severe asthma attacks and chronic bronchitis. We are looking at an estimated 17,000 additional pollution-related deaths nationwide by 2050. These are not abstract numbers. These are our neighbors, our children, and our elderly residents. Furthermore, with the easing of mercury regulations on power plants, we are endangering the developing brains of children and increasing toxic exposure in our coastal communities. While some may think that climate change is a distant problem, here in Maine we are seeing real-time impacts of a warming climate. As the climate changes, 1 in 100-year heat events are becoming regular events, overloading our emergency departments with heat stroke and dehydration. Warmer weather allows vector-borne illnesses to move north. We're witnessing an increase in Lyme disease and other tick-borne illnesses. Those illnesses are not things that I've seen earlier in my 40-year career. The administration argues these rollbacks are about economic saving, that they're ignoring the costs of health care. When the EPA stops factoring lives into cost-benefit analysis of air pollution rules, they're essentially saying our health has no value. The cost of treating thousands of new asthma cases, cardiac events, and heat-related admissions will fall on Maine residents, their insurers, and our hospitals. These rollbacks are not saving money, they're shifting the burden and neighbors to the healthcare system and the public. After 40 years, I know we're not looking at a patient who's in danger. We're looking at a population in danger. Repealing the endangerment climate, removing pollution limits, and ignoring the signs of climate change is a medical disaster. I urge the administration to reverse course. We need strong federal EPA standards, not a rollback that prioritizes industry profits over human life. The health of our children and our future may depend on it. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Dr. Our next speaker is Dr. David Evers, Executive Director and Chief Scientist at the Biodiversity Research Institute.
Great, thank you, Anya. It's good to be here, everyone. So I've been fortunate in some ways to have studied mercury in the environment for the past 35 years. And I've seen the arc of what policy can do. with mercury in the environment. I primarily have studied different species of animals to serve as indicators of the health of the ecosystem that we all depend on. And one of those indicators that I've really focused in on are common loons. And loons are interesting in that they eat fish all day, every day. So they're right in the heart of potential impacts from mercury in the fish that we eat as well. And they're great indicators for us to visualize and see how mercury or methylmercury can impact us ultimately. Loons are fantastic to study because they're in front of us at lakes, and we can see their entire nesting cycle. They live 40 or more years, back to the same place year in, year out. And for many people in Maine, we really enjoy loons on our lakes. And as indicators, I think they provide a lot of information for us over time. And what I've seen since the early 90s is this arc of mercury that's been quite elevated in the systems that we all live in here in Maine and New England, across North America. And it's been good to see how mercury has declined because of different rules and regulations that the country has passed. One rule and regulation is involved incinerators, and there was a decline of mercury in the different loons and populations I studied in those immediate areas. And now I'm seeing the same thing with the MATS rule. The decline in mercury that we domestically release in North America has shown up in the loons that we've studied. So every year, my group catches loons. We have tissue levels that we examine, mercury content in inlands, and we've seen that decline, a significant decline in time related to policies like we have. So I think they're very important to continue. As a scientist, it's important to have the quantitative data to look at and examine and assess these sort of changes over time in key indicators. We've seen the same sort of trend line in fish that we eat regularly here in Maine, and but it's not over yet. There's still mercury in the environment, and some of that mercury in the environment is contributed from outside of Maine, outside of North America, and there's conventions such as the Minamata Convention on Mercury that works hard to reduce mercury as well. So mercury is still an issue around the globe. I like to think that it's no longer as big of an issue here in Maine and the U.S., but I think the fight still needs to be there in front of us. And from a science standpoint, it's my job in my mind to keep measuring and assessing mercury in the environment so we can make good policy decisions based on the scientific data that we have or can. So thank you.
All right, thank you. And our last speaker today is Matthew Wellington, the Associate Director at Maine Public Health Association.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here. Happy Earth Day. My name is Matt Wellington. I'm the Associate Director of Maine Public Health Association. MPHA's mission is to advance health for all people and places in Maine. And that's why I'm here today opposing the reckless rollbacks of funding, policies, and programs that the EPA has done, which will make our communities less healthy and less safe. There's a couple things I just want to emphasize based on what all of our speakers have said. One is that air pollution has a lot of ripple effects, right? So when we talk about increases in asthma and other respiratory illnesses from more air pollution, that means that people who have respiratory conditions can't go outside and stay active. It means that kids, especially small kids who have developing lungs, might not be able to go outside and play, and that has serious ripple effects for their physical, social, and mental health. So this is not just an isolated issue. This really does impact so much of what we do in our communities, our lives. And again, that is why we are urging EPA to not lose sight of its mission, which is to protect the health of all people in America and our environment. The second thing I want to emphasize is that even though Maine is incredibly resilient, there's a lot of amazing work that we can do in our communities, as you've heard from Mayor Hart here in Gardiner. One of the things that we can't do is regulate interstate air pollution. A lot of the pollution that we have in our air here in Maine actually comes from out of state. As you've heard, we're often referred to as the tailpipe of the nation, especially in the summer months when wind patterns bring things like mercury from fossil fuel power plants from out of state, and increasingly wildfire smoke. And I'll never forget a couple years ago, my daughter was 2 years old, sitting inside on what should have been a series of beautiful summer days because wildfire smoke had drifted over Maine and the air was so dangerous that she couldn't be outside as a young kid. That is such a missed opportunity. It's such a shame that she is not able to enjoy the beautiful state that we have here. Well, we have poor air quality days. That's, again, not unique to her, right? This happens all across the state. And we rely on federal policy and programs to regulate and improve air quality here in Maine. The third thing I want to emphasize is that this is about our health, but it's also about our economic prosperity. So when you repeal things like the endangerment finding, which make our air dirtier, will make it harder for us to mitigate the worst impacts of climate change, fuel the risk of extreme weather events. That not only harms our health, it also puts a greater economic burden on Maine families at a time when a lot of folks are already struggling to afford basic needs like healthcare, transportation, and food. That should be top of mind. We want to make sure that people have the best chance that they can to live a happy and healthy life, and having clean air to breathe is a pretty big part in that. So again, I want to emphasize that we want to make sure the EPA reaffirms its mission, which should be to protect the health of all people in our country, protect the environment. And this is not a partisan issue. We're talking about having clean air to breathe, having economic security and prosperity. That's something that we should all support. We all have a stake in that. And we urge the EPA to change what it's doing and reaffirm its mission. So thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Matt, and thank you to all of our speakers today. As you know, and many have said, today is Earth Day. It is one day a year, but it is every day that we need clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, and clean environment to enjoy and recreate and live in here in Maine. And those are huge values for all Mainers. And today we are asking the EPA to stop these rollbacks. We are asking our decision makers, our members of Congress, to please stand up for the health and well-being of all Maine people by ensuring that the EPA fulfills its mission to protect the environment and health of all people in the U.S. and beyond. Thank you so much.